love flowing down from the thorn-covered crown makes me whole, saves my soul, washes whiter than snow. Faithful love calms each fear, reaches down, dries each tear, holds my hand
480. I'll take some selections after this. Blessed assurance,
Jesus is mine. Oh, what a foretaste of glory divine, heir of salvation, purchased of God, born of His Spirit, washed in His blood. This is my story, this is my song, praising my Savior all the day long. This is my story, this is my song, praising my Savior all the day long. Perfect submission, perfect delight, visions of rapture now burst on my sight. Angels descending, bring from above echoes of mercy, whispers of love. This is my story, this is my song, praising my Savior all the day long. This is my story, this is my song, praising my Savior all the day long. Perfect submission, all is at rest. I in my Savior am happy and blessed, watching and waiting, looking above, filled with His goodness, lost in His love. This is my story, this is my song, praising my Savior all the day long. This is my story, this is my song, praising my Savior all the day long.
548. 548. I have found a friend in Jesus, He's everything to me.
He's the fairest of 10,000 to my soul, the lily of the valley. In Him alone I see all I need to cleanse and make me fully whole. In sorrow He's my comfort, in trouble He's my stay.
560. We'll make this one the last one, the first one. I care not today what tomorrow may bring, if shadow or sunshine or rain. The mountain ruleth o'er everything, and all of my worry is vain. Living by faith, yes, living by faith, in Jesus above, in Jesus above, trusting, confiding in His great love, yes, in His great love. From all harm safe in His sheltering arm, His sheltering arm. I'm living by faith, I'm living by faith, and feel no alarm. The tempest may blow and the storm clouds arise, obscuring the brightness of life. I'm never alarmed at the overcast skies. The Master looks on at the strife. Living by faith, yes, living by faith, in Jesus above, in Jesus above, trusting, confiding in His great love, yes, in His great love. From all harm safe in His sheltering arm, His sheltering arm. I'm living by faith, I'm living by faith, and feel no alarm. Our Lord will return to this earth some sweet day. Our troubles will then all be o'er. The Master so gently will lead us away beyond that blessed heavenly shore. Living by faith, yes, living by faith, in Jesus above, in Jesus above, trusting, confiding in His great love, yes, in His great love. From all harm safe in His sheltering arm, His sheltering arm. I'm living by faith, I'm living by faith, and feel no alarm, feel no alarm.
Good morning. Today's announcements. Sunday school lesson is Romans 10, 12 through 21. Next week is Romans 11, 1 through 12. Let's remember Jerry he has a message today. And it says there's still several spots to fill for the cleaning schedule, which not sure if that's still accurate or not, but looks like I want to elect administrative board in April after the spring communion. And we do have a birthday today, so let's sing happy birthday. Happy birthday to you, happy birthday to you, happy birthday dear Brad, happy birthday to you. Are there any other announcements or prayer requests this time? No, let's stand for prayer. And Jim Bob, would you lead us in prayer?
Lord, thank you for this day you've given us, for the beautiful weather, and for the opportunity to gather with like-minded believers and worship you, pray for you. Give us clear minds and open our hearts to receive what you have for us. And just be with Jared as he brings the message, pray that we speak through him, and also the teachers in Sunday school. All may be done for your glory. In your name,
Amen. This time the teachers and the students can be dismissed. And the rest of us.
Okay, does anybody have a children's song? Building up the temple. I thought I was going to have to call on Spencer pretty soon. Okay, let's sing Building Up the Temple. Building up the temple, building up the temple, building up the temple of the Lord. Say, brother, won't you help me? Sister, won't you help me? Building up the temple of the Lord. Building up the temple, building up the temple, building up the temple of the Lord. Say, brother, won't you help me? Sister, won't you help me? Building up the temple of the Lord. 155 in Faith and Praise. $155. We place you on the highest place, for you are the great high priest. We place you high above all else, and we come to you and worship at your feet. We place you on the highest place. You are the great high priest. We place you high above all else, and we come to you and worship at your feet. And we come to you and worship at your feet.
Good morning. Welcome each one to the service this morning. Those of you may be wondering, Dwayne's are actually not here this morning. They're on a cruise, taking a little break, so pray for them as you think about it this week. Jerry, why don't you come up here and have a word of prayer? Dear Lord, we come before you this morning. We thank you for the opportunity to gather together and worship you, and pray especially for Jerry as he studied and he's poured his heart into what you would have for us, and pray you would give him words to speak and be with us as listeners, so we could have open hearts, so we could understand and take what you would have for us. Pray a special blessing on the service. Thank you for all that you've done. In Jesus' name, amen.
Good morning. It is an honor and a privilege to be here this morning again. The weather outside definitely attributed to what I was feeling yesterday as well. I have felt some of the why me temptations Devo has struggled with last Sunday when he was preparing to preach. It was beautiful outside, and with all the things to do, and I was stuck inside. And from sounds of that Valentine's banquet last night was fun. I would have loved to have been there, but I was studying. One of my friends who was recently ordained told me that he struggled with the why me question for a while, until he finally came around to to saying, why not me? Truly a blessing to be here, and I pray God works in your heart like he has in mine. And also a quick note, how many of you ever heard the saying, it takes a village to raise a kid? Who also remembers what goes along with that? Do you call them, or do they just show up? 2 weeks ago has been a year since we lost Maverick, and we've had some pregnancy issues, complications, last-minute doctor appointments, procedures, multiple road trips we weren't sure we should or should not be taking. Plus the flu bug, and sometimes it feels like we'd not be able to catch our breath or take a break. But our village has been showing up. Thank you. And I'm not going to mention everyone, just for fear that I would miss someone, and that would not be in my intention. But last-minute babysitting, bringing in some meals to help us out, praying for us, and just caring for us. Thank you. Honestly, I felt like we were part of a village, and that was nice. So what is today? What is happening? Super Bowl. Who's playing? Carson. Chiefs. Who else is playing? The good team. Spencer. Who's playing? The Eagles. Who's the quarterbacks? All right. Do you know the Eagles are listed as 1.5-point favorites? You guys can cheer for the underdogs if you're going for the Chiefs. Today is referenced as Super Bowl Sunday, and I'll probably be making a lot of sports references today. Per sportsbettingtime.com, an estimated 50.4 million people will wager $16 billion on this year's Super Bowl. That is the equivalent of 1 out of 6 Americans living in the United States placing a wager of some type on this one game amounting to $317. People are placing the bets one way or the other because they want to win. The Chiefs want to win too, but it probably won't happen. There are many horrible things surrounding the Super Bowl, and while they are truly abhorrent, I don't expect to delve into all of them this morning. I want to focus on the winners and the losers. And if you listen at some point, I will tell you the people who will win. Why is winning so important? I have had the privilege and honor occasionally to play football after church with some of the young guys out here. And they're competitive. They're very competitive. They know who won, who lost, who picked Jerry off the last time they played. And it's been 3 months since the last time I played. I played last Sunday, and it had been a while. And I came out there, and they already started talking a little smack talk about who's going to pick me off again. And they remembered how many times it was the last time we played. It was Spencer. And I think he got me, how many times? 3 or 4? 3. See, he remembers. He remembers, and he remembers that they won. They probably remember who won last Sunday, too. Even when I was in school, we would have 15-minute recesses. And we would play basketball or volleyball or whatever. There was never enough time for a complete game, but we always kept score. And we always know who won. And winning is a part of, we all want to win. It's part of our natural desires. So why is winning important? Winning is the very makeup of us. It's part of our natural makeup and basic desires, and it relies on our self-desires to thrive. Winning makes us feel good, and it gives us a good indicator of success. Losing also helps build character and shows areas where we can improve on. Winning starts with choices. Many friendships have been put in the balance when it comes time to pick teams. Do you pick your friends, or do you pick to win? If you've been the team captain, you know what I'm talking about. Or maybe you're the last person picked in dodgeball and you thought your friend should have picked you, but he wanted to win. You know what I'm talking about. For example, in basketball, if you want to scoring titles and accolades in the buddy system, you pick LeBron James. If you want championships, you pick Michael Jordan or Kobe Bryant. It's just that simple. Today, there's a lot of emphasis on winning, but not much on losing. From participation trophies to not keeping score, it helps children develop with strong positive affirmation. There was a 5-year-old who came home from a t-ball game where they refused to keep score, and big emphasis was sending everyone home a winner with a small trophy, a pat on the back, a hug, and a smile. Everyone is a winner. This young 4 or 5-year-old boy, when asked how the game went, said, well, we weren't allowed to keep score, but by my calculations, we whooped them 18-5. What does it take to win? I would like to look this morning at a young man who won against large odds. For our text, we'll be looking at 1 Samuel 17, if you want to turn there. 1 Samuel 17, and we'll be looking at most of the whole chapter. As you turn there, the setting here is, it's a very memorable story. It's David and Goliath. Most of you young boys will know this story. It's, a young little boy slaying a large giant. This is great. This is exciting. But for us adults, we're not going to necessarily turn there, but the story actually starts back in 1 Samuel 14 a little bit. We had the count of a standoff with the garrison of the Philistines and Saul. And Saul, you have to remember, is a new king. I actually enjoyed reading this. Saul lost his donkeys, and he lost his kingdom as well. He couldn't keep track of his donkeys, and he couldn't keep track of his men. Jonathan snuck out of his camp and went over, and he actually snuck up the side of the rock because they were in a standoff. Neither side wanted to give up their defensive position, and Jonathan was tired of waiting, and so he snuck up the mountainside and asked the Lord, do I go up, or are they going to ask me to come to them? And they said, if they tell me to come up, I'm going to go up. And so he went up and killed 20 of the Philistines there, put the Philistines in full retreat. And the people came out of the rocks. They were all hiding. And they came out of the rocks and pursued these Philistines. And as they were pursuing these Philistines back to their home country, Saul made the proclamation, decree during the day that he doesn't want anybody to eat any food. Nothing. I mean, these guys have been fighting all day long. They're famished. They're hungry. They need food. And Saul made this foolish decree. And Jonathan here, he was the one that instigated this. He crept up. He's the one that started the rout, put them in on their heels and in retreat. Jonathan hadn't heard that decree, and he saw some honey, and he dipped his staff down in the honey, and he tasted it. And that sugar rush opened his eyes, and he was strengthened, and he was pursued. And it was told him that, hey, there's this decree that, you're not supposed to do this. And so Saul realized that somebody had disobeyed him. And so they cast lots, was it? And he's like, whoever it is, I don't care who it is, even if it's Jonathan, my own son, they must surely die. And so they cast lots, between the people and between Jonathan and Saul. And it fell between Jonathan and Saul, so the sin is somewhere between those two. And they cast the lots again, and it went between Jonathan and Saul, and Jonathan was taken. And Jonathan, yes, I did take some honey, and I did eat it, and so I must die. And the people that were around said, absolutely not. Did Jonathan really just save us from these Philistines, and now we're going to kill him because of this decree? They didn't say it, but it was a foolish decree. And these people ran out of energy pursuing the Philistines. They couldn't pursue them as far and as hard as they could have. And so we're back here at chapter 17 because they didn't destroy enough of the Philistines, and now they're back. And now they're in the land of Israel. Land of Israel here in chapter 17. And that's where we're going to start. So you kind of see Saul's lack of wisdom and his lack of leadership and not knowing where things are at, and he brings that right into his kingdom. And I actually, as I was studying this, I was like, it's just like the ministry. Saul wasn't a king before he was anointed a king. He was still the same man. He still didn't know where his donkeys were at. And he now became a king. He just didn't know where his men were at. Same with Devo and I. We're still the same men we were before we were ordained. Yes, we're changing. Yes, we're growing into the leadership we're given. But we're still the same guys. And so it actually blessed me reading through this. But so chapter 17, verse 1 is where we'll start. Now the Philistines gathered together their armies to battle, and were gathered together at Shukah, which belongs to Judah, and pitched between Shukah and Ezkah and Ephisdam. And Saul and the men of Israel were gathered together and pitched by the valley of Elah, and set the battle in array against the Philistines. And the Philistines stood on a mountain on the one side, and Israel stood on a mountain on the other side, and there was a valley between them. Both armies had a good defensive position, and if they did not advance any farther, they were within. If they didn't advance any farther, both the mountains are on either side. They could see there. We'd like to think that there was probably a little brook down through the middle. That's where David got his stones. But they're on both defensive sides. You never want to fight uphill. So neither of them wanted to advance any farther, but they could hurl insults back and forth. They were close enough that they could hear each other shouting. And we see that with Goliath later here, arguing and saying and hurling insults at him. Verse 4, and there went a champion out of the camp of the Philistines named Goliath of Gath, whose height was 6 cubits and a span. So what is a champion? A champion is one who is skilled in battle and had a lot of success. A champion could also be hired or called out to settle a dispute between two parties. They each hire a champion and present their champions to fight for their honor or cause, kind of like a duel in the 17th century where you would each have dueling pistols and you would go out and duel to the death to avenge your honor or your wife's honor or whatever grievance was made against you. This is what a champion was. Goliath was very good at it. He was huge, he was big, and he had a great success. So of Gath, what does of Gath? Goliath of Gath, where was that? Gath was a place in the mountains, and it would have been the home of the giants of the 12 spies. So remember when the children of Israel were sent the 12 spies into the promised land, and they weren't sent to spy out the land, and they come back speaking about these huge giants, and they were scared and afraid and didn't want to go in. They would have been in Gath. They would have been in some of these areas. They would have saw these giants. These guys were real. These guys were 10 foot plus tall. It all depends on how you calculate the cubic foot. These guys were big. When Joshua and the children, Goliath was a big, Goliath was a big guy, around 9 to 11 foot tall, depending on how you measure your cubics. For reference in here, I don't know, what are these ceilings? 10 foot, like on the sides here. 9. So his head would have poked through the drywall. If that gives you a little idea. And then he had his arms yet. This guy was big. Carson, that's probably about 3 times a you. He's a big guy, and he's strong, and this guy's been fighting since he was this young. Well, he probably maybe come out that young. But he was, this guy was big, and he's been fighting, he's been used to fighting, we think of guys like that are that big, they tend to be a little soft and a little bit clumsy. I'm guessing he was fighting. He obviously has been a champion. He's definitely taken a few men's heads. He's good at what he does. So these giants, we read in Deuteronomy 3:11 that there was a king Og of Bashan that needed a bed 13 and a half foot by 6 foot. Also, later in 2 Samuel, we read where David's nephew slew Goliath's brother, and he was actually listed as just a little bit taller than Goliath. And David's servants later would slay a giant with 6 fingers and 6 toes. That's getting out there a little bit. Compare that to today's NBA, where the average height, and height is a big advantage in the NBA. And the average height in the NBA is around 6'6". So that's pretty much above average of Americans. And this guy is 9'6" if you're being modest. 9'9" actually. This guy's up there. Verse 4, or we just read verse 4. Verse 5, and he had a helmet of brass upon his head, and he's armed with a coat of mail, and the weight of the coat was 5,000 shekels of brass. And so this coat would have been like interlocking pieces of metal, kind of like fish scales. They overlapped, but it also gave him some flexibility. And this 5,000 shekels would have easily have been around 156 pounds. Some of you guys probably weigh 156 pounds. That would have been carrying like a whole nother person on your body, which, this guy's also 9'6", so he probably didn't even tell that it was on there, But that's just his coat of mail. He had his helmet, his shin guards, everything else, plus his sword, his spear, and the buckler on his back. This is just the ring mail. That's a lot of weight this guy's carrying. Verse 6, and he had greaves of brass upon his legs and a target of brass between his shoulders, which would, basically protect him from behind. And the greaves of brass would go down and protect his shins. If you think about it, he probably needed those because his shins would have been about eye level with me. This guy was up there, and if you're swinging a sword, that's right where he's going to be at, is right at knee level. Verse 7, and the staff of his spear was like a weaver's beam, and his spearhead weighed 600 shekels of iron, which would be about 18 and a half, 19 pounds. You think of a sledgehammer. I don't know how many of you guys have a 5-pound sledgehammer, and you swing that at a stake. Try throwing it. That's 5 pounds. 18 and a half pounds, and it's out there on the end, and this guy's, I just imagine this guy's an ox. Ugh. He's big. And so verse 8, and he stood and cried unto the armies of Israel, and said unto them, why are you come out to set your battle in array? Am not I a Philistine? And ye servants to Saul? Choose you a man for you, and let him come down to me. If he be able to fight with me, and to kill me, then will we be your servants. But if I prevail against him, and kill him, then shall ye be our servants, and serve us. Well, the guy's going to be dead. Is he really in a position to be making the argument about whose servants he will be if he loses? I don't think he's going to really care at that point anymore. The guy's going to be dead. But verse 8 there, he's really going after Saul. Adam Clark has a commentary on this, which I think, and I literally going to take this word for word out of there, on the Targum, adds much to these statements that we gloss over. This is the substance of Goliath's speech. I am Goliath, the Philistine of Gath. And this is what he's saying when he's saying I'm a Philistine, who killed the two sons of Eli, Hophni and Phinehas, the priest. And if you guys remember, the Ark of the Covenant was taken out of Israel. And this Goliath was saying, I was there. I was the one. I helped kill these two priests. Your priests, your guys that are your priests to your high God, I killed these two guys. I took your ark. I was there, and led into captivity the ark of the covenant of Jehovah, and placed it in the temple of Dagon, my God. And it remained in the cities of the Philistines 7 months. He doesn't say that they sent it back because they couldn't stand to have it in their house, and that this ark literally destroyed their god Dagon. Also, in our battles, I have gone at the head of the army, and we conquered and cut down men, and laid them as dust of the earth. And this day, the Philistines have not even granted me the honor of being a chief of 1,000 men. He's done all these big things. He's a big guy, and they don't even let him be a chief of 1,000 men. And ye, men of Israel, what exploit has Saul done that you guys would make him a king? Not even a chief of 1,000 people. You guys made him a king. What has he done? He hasn't done a single thing. If he be a hero, if he's so great, let him come down and fight with me. But if he be a weak or cowardly man, then choose you out a man that may come down unto me. This is a direct challenge to Saul. Verse 11. Verse 10, and the Philistine said, I defy the armies of Israel this day. Give me a man that we may fight together. Verse 11, I think, is important. When Saul and all Israel heard those words of the Philistine, they were dismayed and greatly afraid. Saul included. Saul was dismayed and afraid. And I think it's noteworthy that we remember when Saul was anointed as king of Israel, it was mentioned, his physical description was listed, that Saul was a head and shoulders above everyone else. Saul was their Goliath. Saul was their champion. Saul was the tallest guy that they had. Realistically, how many big, tall people like Goliath are coordinated and athletic? Not very many. In the NBA, there have been a few 7-foot guys that have managed to put up some good games. But you start getting to about 7'6", and they soon start to become uncoordinated and bumbling oxes that are injury prone and don't know which way their elbows and knees are going half the time. It's true. Get someone like Michael Jordan or Kobe Bryant at 6'6", and they will beat the 7'6" guy up the court back and forth all day long. They're just athletic. They know their size, and they're keen for this. This is what Saul is. Saul would have been right around 6'6" to 6'9". Somewhere right in that range is where Saul probably was at. He had the Michael Jordan body. He didn't have the desire to win. The Bible also describes Saul as a handsome man, or as a goodly looking man. I don't know many string beans that are considered goodly looking. You know, you get a guy that's 6'9", he was probably well proportioned. If he was a good looking guy, he was probably fit. Saul was Michael Jordan's body type. He was made to this. He was made for this. But he didn't have the desire to win. Athleticism is important in sports just as it is in any fight for your life, like it is here with Goliath. I doubt Goliath could run as fast as Saul. Probably didn't have as fast as reflexes. If they'd have challenged each other to a foot race, Saul would have probably beat him all up and down the hill. We can clearly see here that Goliath was full of himself, and overconfidence just means underestimation. I mean, just don't get too close to Goliath. He's going to crush you with his bare hands. Like, probably one hand he could break Saul's windpipe, but if you don't get too close to this guy, what's he going to do? I mean, you can see that spear getting some momentum coming, you would think, and step out of the way. Just dance in and out. This guy's going to wear out eventually. I mean, the guy's moving 156 pounds of mail. He's going to slowly start wearing out. And then when he gets too heavy and hard to breathe, to block your shots, you get in there and finish him off. But Saul only saw a roughly 10-foot giant. He saw the armor, the sword, the spear, and he was scared. So here comes young David. Let's go back, and I think we left off at verse 11. When Saul and all Israel heard those words of the Philistine, they were dismayed and greatly afraid. Now David was the son of that Ephrathite of Bethlehem, Judah, whose name was Jesse, and he had 8 sons, and the men went among men for an old man in the days of Saul, which is essentially saying Jesse was too old to go to battle, but he had 8 sons. And so he sent 3 of these sons in verse 13. And the 3 eldest sons of Jesse went and followed Saul to the battle. And the name of his 3 sons that went to the battle were Eliab, the firstborn, and the next unto him Abinadab, and the third Shammah. And David was the youngest, and the 3 eldest followed Saul. But David went and returned from Saul to feed his father's sheep at Bethlehem. And the Philistines drew near morning and evening, and the Philistine, which would be Goliath, drew near morning and evening and presented himself 40 days. This is a long time. And Jesse said unto David his son, Take now for thy brethren an ephah of this parched corn, and these 10 loaves, and run to the camp to thy brethren. And carry these 10 cheeses unto the captain of their 1,000. And why does the captain get the cheese? Why did the sons not get the cheese? I don't know. I found it noteworthy. And look how thy brethren fare, and take their pledge. And taking their pledge would mean, that they took, if they needed something, they would put their name on it and say it was their line of credit, essentially. This is like if they ran out of food, if they ran out of clothes, they'd say, hey, I pledge unto you that I will pay you back. And so when David shows up, he's essentially showing up to take their pledge, means he's coming to pay their bills, any outstanding bills that they have. That's what David's here to do. Now Saul and they and all the men of Israel were in the valley of Elah fighting with the Philistines. And David rose up early in the morning and left the sheep with a keeper, and took and went as Jesse had commanded him. And he came to the trench as the host was going forth to the fight, and shouted for the battle. For Israel and the Philistines had put the battle in array, army against army. And David left his carriage in the hand of the keeper of the carriage, and ran into the army, and came and saluted his brother. And as he talked with them, behold, there came up the champion, the Philistine of Gath, Goliath by name, out of the armies of the Philistines, and spake according to the same words, and David heard them. Verse 23, And all the men of Israel, when they saw the man, fled from him, and were sore afraid. And the men of Israel said, Have ye seen this man that is come up? Surely to defy Israel is he come up. And it shall be that the man who killed him, the king will enrich him with great riches, and will give him his daughter, and make his house free in Israel, which basically means his father's house free in Israel, like he would be free from all the taxes, the duties, the tariffs, all the things that are levied against the common folk to support the crown. Saul's saying, I will make your house free. You won't have to pay these taxes anymore. So you get a wife, you get great riches, and you get tax-free. That sounds like a pretty good deal. I mean, you might lose your life, but it's still a pretty good deal. Verse 26, And David spake to the men that stood by him, saying, What shall be done to the man that killeth the Philistine? He literally just heard what's going to be done. And he turns around again and says, What shall be done? And that shall take away the reproach from Israel. For who is this uncircumcised Philistine, that he should defy the armies of the living God? And the people answered him after this manner, saying, So it shall be done to the man that killeth him. And Eliab, his eldest brother, heard when he spake unto the men. And Eliab's anger was kindled against David, and he said, Why camest thou down hither? And with whom hast thou left those few sheep in the wilderness? I know thy pride, and the naughtiness of thine heart, for thou art come down that thou mightest see the battle. Eliab sounds just like an older brother, doesn't he? I'm guessing he was a typical older brother too. There were 8 boys in that household, and Eliab was the oldest and David the youngest. If any of you have had a brother or 2 or 3, you know what I'm talking about. I'm guessing there was a little envy and a little jealousy here too. Remember, David had just returned from the king's court, where he would play the harp for King Saul. It was kind of like Joseph and his brothers. Joseph who was given extra treatment, and David was as well. He was sent into the court. So when David came back out of the court and was sent home back to the sheep, and then he went back to the army, and Eliab's like, this is finally my time to shine. This is finally, I'm given the opportunity. Pesky little brother David is at home with the sheep. Now it's our time to get some honor and glory. And here comes David right into the ranks. Hey, well, how's it going? And his anger was kindled. If you guys ever had brothers, you know what, there's some tussling and fighting to go on to see who's the biggest and the strongest. If you have, we went through that a little bit as well. And about every 2 weeks, you need to check to see if that pecking order has changed any. See if you got a little stronger than your other brother. I also think Jesse here had a little bit to play in this. He knew what was coming. And and I think David was a little blindsided. So when David came into the ranks to check on the needs of his brothers, they just knew he was coming to usurp them yet again, because they knew he thought too much of himself to stay at home. Yet he was only doing his father's bidding. Verse 29, and David said, what have I done? Is there not a cause? I think David's a little blindsided. What happened here? Why are you speaking so harshly against me? He was just doing his father's bidding. And to be clear, I don't think Jesse was entirely innocent here. He was present when Saul anointed David, when he was a boy. He realized that there was something special for David. There was something great going to come from David. He was anointed. I don't know if his brothers were there, but his father knew. And so when it came time to send somebody to the battle, he sent David. Because you got to realize, in the old times, glory was made in battle. You didn't become great. Like, the generals were the power. The soldiers, you got fame, you got honor through battle. And so when he had time to send guys in for these, they're sitting there 40 days, remember, in this battle. And so when Jesse decided to send food in, he sent David. And I think he did that intentionally. David was out in the pasture with the sheep. His job was to watch the sheep. He had servants. He had other brothers. There's only 3 of them there. That means there's 4 somewhere else. And then there's David. And he picked David to go in. And so I don't think Jesse's entirely innocent here. He sent him to the battle scene with when any one of his servants could have done the job. Verse 30, and when he turned from him to another and spake after the same manner, and the people answered him again after the same manner. So his older brother had just rebuked him, saying, why are you speaking like this? You just come out here because you want to see the battle. Shouldn't you be at home watching your few little sheep? And David's like, well, I'm sorry, what have I done? And then turns around and asks the same question again that he'd just been accused of asking. And when the words reached, and verse 31, and the words were heard which David spake, they rehearsed them before Saul, and he sent for him. This is the 3rd time David is asking what reward should be given the man that kills Goliath. He kept repeating this a little incredulously, thinking, why haven't any of you volunteered already? A princess? Riches? No taxes? Let's go! And these guys are all huddling in fear whenever Goliath comes out. Verse 32, David summoned before Saul, and David said to Saul, let no man's heart fail because of him. Thy servant will go and fight with this Philistine. And Saul said to David, thou art not able to go against this Philistine to fight with him, for thou art but a youth, and he a man of war from his youth. This guy's been fighting from his way up, and you're just a young little man. And David said unto Saul, thy servant kept his father's sheep, and there came a lion and a bear, and took a lamb out of the flock. And I went out after them, and smote them, and delivered it out of his mouth. And when he rose up against me, I caught him by his beard, and I smote him and slew him. I think it's important to mention here, verse 34. Eliab had just accused David of just being a shepherd. The first thing David says when he sees the king is, well, I'm a shepherd. I keep the sheep. But I also protect the sheep. Eliab hurled it as an insult, and David mentioned it as a strength and an attribute to his success in killing the lion and the bear. Verse 36, we read that. Thy servant slew both the lion and the bear, and this uncircumcised Philistine shall be as one of them, seeing he hath defied the armies of the living God. God was with David. David believed God delivered the lion and bear into his hand, and he was even more confident of slaying Goliath because he was literally defying the living God. Verse 38, or verse 30, Verse 37, David said, moreover, the Lord that delivered me out of the paw of the lion and out of the paw of the bear, he will deliver me out of the hand of this Philistine. And Saul said unto him, and to David, go, and the Lord be with thee. And Saul armed David with his armor, and he put on helmets of brass upon his head. Also he armed him with a coat of mail. And David girded his sword upon his armor, and he essayed to go, for he had not proved it. And David said unto Saul, I cannot go with these, for I have not proved them. And David took the armor, and David put them off of him. He took the armor back off. And he took his staff in his hand, and chose him 5 smooth stones out of the brook, and put them in a shepherd's bag which he had, even in a scrip. And his sling was in his hand, and he drew near to the Philistine. 5 smooth stones, perfect for slinging accurately. David was confident in the Lord's help, but he was prudent enough to pick 5 stones, not just one. The sling that they used back then was composed of 2 strings with a leather strap in the middle. One string they'd actually tie around the wrist, and the other end of the string they would hold in between their thumb and their middle joint on their index finger. And then they would whirl it 2 or 3 times, and on the second or third time, they would release the one string, it would let go of the rock, and the rock would fly from the elbow or from your shoulder down to the end of the sling. However long the string was, is how much faster the rock would get to going. The ancient Belerians of that region commonly carried 3 different strings of 3 different slings, and they also had 3 different lengths. They would have a long one for when the enemy was a lot further out there, a medium one for when they got a little closer, and a short one for close combat. And they would have 3 of them on their persons at all times. One was wrapped around their head, one was used as a girdle, and the other one was literally wrapped around their wrist. And so when we read of David here, and his sling was in his hand, it was probably wrapped around his arm. The children of Israel they've been in the promised land for a little while here, but I think David probably picked this up from some of the native people. He's out there in the shepherd field, and I'm guessing he probably got pretty good with it. It is said that the Belerians would set bread on top of a post or a pole, and their young children would have to practice from a marked distance and hit the bread down from off the top of the pole before they were allowed to eat breakfast. And as they grew older and older, the distance would keep moving farther and farther back. So I don't know how many of you children get up and say you're hungry, and your mom gives you yogurt or a banana or whatever you eat for breakfast. But if she told you you had to hit the bread from off the top of the pole before you could get breakfast, you'd probably get pretty good at hitting the bread off the pole. Some of these adult men could hit their targets at up to 600 feet. And when they say 600 feet is 200 yards, that's getting out there. And they're hitting, they could hit within a hand's breadth, which typically a hand breadth would be 9 inches. A 9-inch circle they could hit at 600 feet. And so these guys were getting good. David clearly picked up the skill set and no doubt practiced it alone as a shepherd boy. And the Philistine came on and drew near unto David, and the man that bare his shield went before him, verse 41. Verse 42, and when the Philistine looked about and saw David, he disdained him, for he was but a youth and ruddy and of a fair countenance. And the Philistine said unto David, Am I a dog, that thou comest to me with staves? And the Philistine cursed David by his gods, which basically means he dismissed him. Like, seriously, you come to me with a little stick? Because David had his staff, and it looked probably like a little rod, and he probably looked like a little shepherd boy. And I think Goliath was insulted. He looked down on David and perhaps thought it was even a joke. He even proceeds to mock David, asking him if he'd brought that wooden staff to beat him like a dog, because that's what the shepherds carried, was staffs like that. Verse 44, and the Philistine said to David, Come to me, and I will give thy flesh into the fowls of the air and to the beasts of the field. He's trash talking. And I'm no stranger to trash talk and probably do more than I should, but frankly, I kind of enjoy it. I also have to chuckle when I receive it. After our ordination, there was a few smart comments from some basketball players about how many baskets they're going to drop on their new pastor. The same thing also flips the shoe whenever I happen to get a lucky play. I can tell them, are you really going to let your pastor do that to you? Goliath is goading David here, saying what he's going to do to him. Maybe even make him angry enough that he just charges in a blind fit of rage. And, they hurled insults back and forth here, and then, David said something offensive to him as well. I'm no fan of like boxing or UFC fights. I can't stand when you get two guys in a cage and they just start wailing on each other. You know, and they can literally go up and they exchange pleasantries, and then the bell will ding and they'll start slugging at each other and hitting each other and getting all bloody and whatever. I've said the first round should be a round of insults, where it's verbal barrage only, where they like they did here, David and Goliath, they hurled insults back and forth until they were properly aggrieved, and then they were allowed a chance to, you know, avenge their honor. I think in boxing it would have had a whole nother element, and I would not be so offended when these guys, they literally fight till the bell dings, and after the bell dings, you know, they'll touch gloves and, hey, good game, you know, whatever. No, he just bloodied his nose. Like, I don't know how that's fun. Verse 45. Then David said to the Philistine, David's returning the insult, "Thou comest to me with a sword and with a spear and with a shield." And he saw them; they were big. But I come to thee in the name of the Lord of hosts, the God of the armies of Israel, whom thou hast defied. This day will the Lord deliver thee into mine hand, and I will smite thee, and take thine head from thee, and I will give the carcasses of the hosts of the Philistines this day into the fowls of the air, and to the wild beasts of the earth, and all the earth may know that there is a God in Israel. And all this assembly shall know that the Lord saveth not with sword and spear, for the battle is the Lord's, and he will give you into our hands. These are the most important verses in the whole chapter. David recognizes where the victory will come from. Not from his own strength, not from all the time he's been practicing with his sling. It's going to come from the Lord. Verse 48, and it came to pass, when David had ticked him off enough, that the Philistine arose and came and drew nigh to meet David. But David hasted and ran towards the army to meet the Philistine. And David put in his hand in his bag, and took thence out a stone, and he began to whirl it. And he slang it, and smote the Philistine in his forehead, that the stone stunk into his forehead, and he fell upon his face to the earth. So David prevailed over the Philistine with a sling and with a stone, and smote the Philistine, and slew him. But there was no sword in the hand of David. Therefore David ran and stood upon the Philistine, and took his sword, and drew it out of the sheath thereof, and slew him, and cut off his head therewith. And when the Philistines saw their champion was dead, they fled. And the men of Israel and Judah arose and shouted, and pursued the Philistines, until they come to the valley and to the gates of Ekron. And the wounded of the Philistines fell down by the way to Shaaraim, even unto Gath and unto Ekron. And the children of Israel returned from chasing after the Philistines, and they spoiled their tents. And David took the head of the Philistine and brought it to Jerusalem, but he put his armor in his tent. And when saw David go forth against the Philistine, he said unto Abner, the captain of the host, Abner, whose son is this youth? And Abner said, As the soul liveth, O king, I don't know, I can't tell. And the king said, Inquire thou whose son this stripling is. And as David returned from the slaughter of the Philistine, Abner took him and brought him before Saul with the head of the Philistine in his hand. And Saul said to him, Whose son art thou, thou young man? And David answered, I am the son of thy servant Jesse, the Bethlehemite. And as we read, Jonathan was there present when Saul was introduced back to Saul, and that was when their souls were knit together. When I read this story as a young boy, I always used to think that after Goliath fell, that the thoughts going through the Philistine's head had to be something about that if a young boy could do this to a 10-foot champion, what could the adult men do to the rest of them? It really brought some strength there. So David won. We all want to win. Why did David win? Because God was on his side. What are the consequences of losing? Tonight, when you are watching the Super Bowl, watch the losing team. Watch as the clock winds down. Most likely it'll probably be the Chiefs. Look at their faces. See the disappointment? See the despair? A few of the men might even cry. This is just for a year's work. They've worked all season for this game. What was it going to cost David if he lost? It was going to cost him his life. If he lost to Goliath, God would have been dishonored and Israel would have been defeated. We all want to win. I want you to win. I want you to beat your struggles, your temptations. The title for today's message is simply The Choice. You can choose to win or you can choose to lose. There are many different points and applications and life applications that have been used with the story of David and Goliath. Facing the giants in your life, overcoming evil, being used of God, just to name a few. And even at EBI pastoral classes, they taught us how to prepare a sermon. You know, you have an opening, 3 main points, never more than 4 points, a call to action, a closing. That's all great. Today I have 1 point. Not 3, 1, because it's so important. If you want to win, you have to have Jesus in your heart. If God isn't with you, you will lose. Like Goliath, if you do not have God on your side, you are losing. Boys and girls, to win, you must have Jesus in your heart. David would not have won if he didn't have God on his side. Esther, Abraham, Joshua, none of them would have won their battles if God was not on their side. And little girls, you know, we're talking about David as a little boy. Think of Esther. Esther was a little girl. She won because God was on her side. God wants to help you win. God wants to help you overcome your struggles, your pain, and your hurts. If you do not invite him into your heart, he cannot help you and you will not win. Life is like football. If it can be going well, you might even be the quarterback, and you are within scoring range and have plenty of time on the clock. Defense has yet to touch you, and you've been throwing out from inside the pocket all game long. Life is a piece of cake. And suddenly, an outside linebacker slips through your offensive line on your blind side. You don't even see him coming. This guy is huge. We'll call him the fridge. And he hits you. You don't see it coming, and this guy is all muscle, 300 pounds. Something happens in your life so devastating you never saw it coming. A 300-pound muscled monster that hits you so hard you are left reeling on the ground, gasping for breath, begging God for mercy, and you want out of the game. But God is on your side. There is no quitting. You get up, dust yourself off, and you make another play call to run a spread offense. Multiple opportunities to advance the ball. And your best thrown intentions get picked off. Words that you have said are caught, twisted out of context, and flung back in your face. Sometimes in life, you do not see any way forward, and you are forced to punt the ball and go on the defensive. It will look like 4th down and 35 yards at times. You will have flags thrown and penalties levied that you do not agree with. With God on your side, you are guaranteed victory. Maybe you are at halftime taking a break, gleaning wisdom from the coaches on how to improve your game. Maybe you are in the 4th quarter with 30 seconds left and you don't even know it. Today, exactly 2 weeks ago, I sat down with Jordan Hostetler at Fellowship Lunch in Plain City, and we talked about life. We talked about his upcoming snowmobiling trip to Michigan. 6 days later, Jordan was dead. He was in the 4th quarter. I had attended Jordan's funeral this past Wednesday and placed dirt over his young body. 22 years old, and his game was up. Life was over. His family got blindsided by a 300-pound linebacker. But guess what? Jordan, he won. Jordan had Christ in his heart. And there's not a shadow in a doubt that Jordan is with Jesus. Jordan lived a life that was above reproach. Jordan chose Jesus and he won. Do you have Jesus in your heart? Will you win? Tonight, if you watch the Super Bowl, look at the losing team. If you think they look sad and disappointed, it'll be nothing compared to eternity. In Matthew, it speaks of weeping and gnashing of teeth if you lose. You have too much to lose. The choice is yours. Will you win? Will you allow Jesus into your heart? Romans 10:9 reads that if thou shalt confess with thy mouth the Lord Jesus Christ, and shalt believe in thine heart that God raised him from the dead, thou shalt be saved. The path to heaven is simple, but if you want to win, you must have Jesus in your heart. If you want to win, talk to your parents or an adult in your life. I would be happy to spend time with you as well. Look at the winners of the Super Bowl tonight. There will be confetti, t-shirts, and hats with champion emblazoned on them. The Lombardi Trophy will be hoisted. Players will take their turns kissing it and holding it, taking pictures. They will have a parade when the winning team returns to their hometown. Luke 15 says that there will be rejoicing in heaven over one sinner that comes to repentance. You will have your own parade. Let the angels sing. You must have Jesus in your heart. Maybe you have already made that choice for Jesus, and whether it is your job, a death, or failed relationship that blindsided you, and you feel this morning like that you have been run over by the 300-pound lineman. You are struggling to breathe. Be encouraged. Do not give up. You have got this. The devil doesn't care how he gets you as long as he gets you. So don't stay down in the dirt begging to get out of the game. Get up. You will win. Stay strong. Like David, the battle is the Lord's. In closing, I'm going to read the lyrics to the song, "The Battle Belongs to the Lord" by Jamie Owens. In heavenly armor we will enter the land. The battle belongs to the Lord. No weapon that's fashioned against us will stand. The battle belongs to the Lord. And we sing glory, honor, power, and strength to the Lord. When the power of darkness comes in like a flood, the battle belongs to the Lord. He's raised up a standard, the power of his blood. The battle belongs to the Lord. And we sing glory, honor, power, and strength to the Lord. When your enemy presses in hard, do not fear. The battle belongs to the Lord. Take courage, my friend. Your redemption is near. The battle belongs to the Lord. And we sing glory, honor, power, and strength to the Lord. Let's stand.